Today I'm going to talk about how green these Tesla electric cars actually are. Now, they certainly cost a lot of green. This particular brand new Model Y, as it sits, costs about $65,000. But the real question is, how green are they ecologically? And that is a lot more complex answer. Depends on many things. What's your idea of green? Where do you live? Now, it's an electric car, so it doesn't burn gasoline. It uses electricity. Has a giant lithium-ion battery that weighs 1,200 pounds inside, and it runs on electricity. But of course, electricity doesn't grow on trees. If it's green or not depends a lot upon where you live. Let's say you live in Iceland, where they have all that thermal energy from volcanoes and underground seismic activity. They get their energy for nothing, and they can make electricity with steam generators and basically free energy. And so it's very green there. It's totally renewable. They just use the steam to make electricity to power the cars. But let's face it, only a few 100,000 people live in Iceland. Here in the United States, over 60% of the electricity is generated from fossil fuels. So you know there's no tailpipe here with emissions, burning all the fossil fuels to make the electricity that drives this car. Now let's talk about the lithium-ion battery inside this thing. It weighs about 1,200 pounds, but it only has like 22 pounds of lithium in it. And unlike lead-acid batteries, which in the United States, 99% of them are recycled because they're easy to recycle. There's lead and stuff they can break them. They can reuse practically all the lead over. This 1,200-pound battery only has 22 pounds of lithium in it, and it is very hard to extract it once it's been put into the battery. They are not easily recyclable batteries. It's kind of like the problem of recycling computers and electronics. Generally, here in the United States, we send them to Asia or something. We hope that a bunch of Asians in little factories take them apart and recycle them. They are a real hassle to recycle. So are these giant batteries. Kind of adding insult to injury, getting this lithium can be a very filthy process. Tesla gets theirs from a Chinese company, but they have mines all over the world, South America, Australia, Ireland. They get them from all over the place. And that is a very dirty process in many cases of getting the lithium out. In one process, 500,000 gallons of water are used and polluted to make 1 metric ton of lithium. It's a very polluting process. And often the dirty water isn't legally cleaned up or put anywhere all that safe. A lot of countries like South America and stuff, they don't have any rules that people follow all that much. Sure, you're not polluting your own backyard, but you're still polluting the earth. So this green image isn't as green as you might think. And a German science report shows that the production of 1 Tesla Model 3 battery can release 15 tons of CO2 during the process. And it gets even worse because in the production of 1 ton of many of these rare earth elements like lithium and cobalt that are used in these batteries, 75 tons of acid waste is created and even 1 ton of radioactive waste. So as you can see, the green is a little bit more tarnished than you might think. And if you really want to look at the overall picture, Tesla itself actually makes a profit because of carbon credits. They sell carbon credits to other companies. One of the big ones, Fiat Chrysler. They pay Tesla hundreds of millions of dollars for these carbon credits. So they can produce cars that pollute more and get the credit of Tesla for making these electric cars. As you can see, they also pollute themselves, but they're actually helping other companies still produce more polluting cars, and they get money for it. To me, it doesn't make any sense, but hey, that's the world these days, especially in Europe where they're really worried about that stuff. They give these credits out, and they're paying a lot of money to companies like Tesla for their carbon credit. Now, I could never really comprehend that. I'm sure this doesn't exist because I couldn't find it in my research, but I would find it totally hilarious if a company like Tesla, making electric cars that are charged by electricity that's often made by coal burning in the United States or fossil fuels, were giving carbon credits to these places that are burning the coal or the fossil fuels to make the electricity. Now, as far as I can see, that doesn't exist yet, but it would be rather ironic. I know Fiat Chrysler pays them money. Now, without these carbon credits, Tesla would actually be losing money. The only reason they made money a short time ago for the first time was because of hundreds of millions of dollars of these carbon tax credits that are given to them. Now, of course, all the companies try to hide this information for you, but Bloomberg News showed last year that in a Delaware court, both GM and Fiat Chrysler admitted that they were buying carbon credits from Tesla. And Tesla admits that they get money from various regulatory rules across the world. So much money per car sold. Some people have even theorized that one of the reasons that Tesla quality is low, where the fit and finish isn't that good, is because he's rushing to sell as many cars as possible, because some of it seems to be based upon how many cars you produce. You produce more, you get more credit, and that's more money in his pocket. And to me, that kind of makes sense, because I always wondered, okay, $65,000 car, but the fit and finish isn't all that good. If you take a European or a Japanese luxury car, their fit and finish is phenomenal compared to these things in the same price range of gasoline or diesel vehicles. Their lack of quality is probably going to bite them in the rear end one of these days if they don't fix it, because eventually people aren't going to pay that kind of money. There'll be other companies making cars with better fit and finish that cost less, and that'll be the end of the stock that's all raised high because people think that's the future. You watch one of my earlier videos, there's a company in China now that's making a 4-seated convertible car for $4,000 that can go 62 miles an hour. And when you think about green, you should really think small, not bigger. Take this Model Y, go 150 miles an hour. It is an insanely fast vehicle. But is that green? Get a little car with a smaller battery. The smaller battery has a much smaller carbon footprint on it than this big 1,200-pound battery. It's starting to look a little less green, because let's face it, it's illegal to drive 150 miles an hour in most places of the United States. Do you really need to build a vehicle with such a huge battery with so much power? Well, Tesla's playing the luxury game there, you know, the horsepower race that they're all doing, same as GM, Ford, Chrysler, where they're making trucks that, you know, have 700 horsepower. But at least with that, there's some sense, because you had a truck, you might want to pull a lot of weight, you know? You don't see that many people pulling heavy weights in these things. They could, because they're electric. But, of course, this thing doesn't have a trailer hitch on it. So really, you look at the overall picture, you got a big, heavy battery that creates all kinds of pollution when it's created. They're getting carbon credits for profit for the company, many coming from companies that make cars that pollute. Maybe they couldn't even make those cars that pollute if they didn't get these credits. So they're to the max. When I was in Houston, hey, look what happened on that big freeze. People were freezing to death. They couldn't handle it. The power infrastructure is weak. Nobody's putting money into infrastructure because there's not that much profit in it. Where's all the electricity going to come if everybody starts driving these things around? I asked an electrician when I was in Houston, I said, what would happen if everybody started to put these giant Tesla chargers at their house? Because if you want to charge one of these things up, you got to have at least a 220, if not a 440 volt charger. And my friend, the electrician, said, Scotty, those wires in your backyard would probably melt, because the wires in the backyard of my house, they were bare wire on the top, the power wires. They were put in like 1946, talking about a lot of old infrastructure in the United States. You're not going to have millions and millions of cars charging up with electricity that doesn't exist, or is an infrastructure that can't handle that kind of power. And of course, the batteries themselves wear out over time. If you want to keep a car forever, you're going to have to buy new batteries. As I've talked in the past, people rebuild these batteries. This thing's got thousands of little tiny lithium ion batteries all hooked up together in a gigantic battery case. You can rebuild them by replacing some of them. If you've got an old machine that's 10, 12 years old and the battery's going bad and they rebuild it, hey, if it's got thousands of cells, maybe they'll change a few hundred of them. The other ones are still going to be 10, 12 years old, and they're not going to work as well. They're not going to last that long. You got to figure that stuff in if you're trying to talk green and something that's going to last a long time and not pollute. And of course, rather ironically, Elon Musk runs SpaceX. He's got rocket ships that run on diesel fuel. They run on kerosene. Made a video about that. If you didn't see it, hey, basically, he copied the Russian technology. Kerosene has more energy than liquid hydrogen, easier to store, weighs a lot less. So he's got skinny rockets, right, that go up and have more power. They're polluting. They're very polluting machines. Is it really all that green when you consider the pollution created making the batteries? The pollution created, 60% of electricity in the United States comes from burning fossil fuels, and these giant batteries are not that recyclable. It's not as clean as you might think.